Have you ever stopped to wonder, why does McDonald's sell literally billions of burgers, but they don't manufacture the actual kitchen equipment used to cook them? It seems like they could save an absolute fortune doing it, right? Well, the answer to that question actually unlocks the ultimate echelon of business decision-making. And honestly, getting that answer right is the difference between building a massive global empire and running a totally bankrupt business.
Welcome to This Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're going to break down exactly how large organizations structure their master plans. Specifically, we'll be focusing heavily on corporate-level strategy, but in the much larger context of the hierarchies of decision-making. We're going to figure out how the world's most successful companies architect their success from the top down. Because frankly, understanding this isn't just some dry academic exercise in corporate theory. This is quite literally about a business surviving in a ruthlessly competitive world.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start off with the strategy hierarchy, take a deep dive into corporate strategy, explore corporate growth and direction, drop down to the business and functional levels, and finally, look at uniting the hierarchy.
All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, the strategy hierarchy.
The first thing we need to wrap our heads around is that strategy isn't just one giant vague idea. It's actually a highly structured, nested hierarchy. Think of a company's corporate DNA as being split into 3 distinct tiers. At the very top, you've got the corporate-level strategy. That feeds down into the business-level strategy, which dictates competitive moves. And finally, that drops all the way down to the functional-level strategy, which covers your crucial day-to-day departments. Strategy making absolutely must start at the top and flow downward in this exact sequence, because if you mess up the top, the bottom is inevitably going to fail.
Let's ground ourselves in this rule of 3. Corporate strategy asks the biggest, most existential question. What business should we even be in? Business strategy asks, okay, how do we actually compete in this specific business? And functional strategy asks, how do we operate day to day to make those higher goals a reality? Keep this overarching structure in the back of your mind, because we're about to zoom way in on that top tier.
Which brings us to Section 2, deep dive, corporate strategy. Let's take the elevator all the way up to the top floor.
So what is it exactly? By definition, corporate-level strategy dictates the overall direction and scope of the entire organization. It determines the types of businesses and industries the firm should even compete in. The absolutely crucial point here is that this level is entirely about high-stakes portfolio management and grand vision. The executives at this tier, they aren't dealing with daily squabbles with direct competitors. They're deciding what battlefield the company should be standing on in the first place. And why does that matter? Because if you choose the wrong battlefield, even your very best soldiers aren't going to win the war. Let's tie this right back to that question that kicked off this whole explainer. Entering a massive new geographic market like China is a prime corporate-level scope decision, and choosing to start a manufacturing arm to build kitchen equipment, that would represent a massive diversification strategy. You're entering a totally new line of business. For McDonald's, the top executives explicitly decided their core business is fast food retail, not heavy manufacturing. Establishing those firm boundaries is exactly what corporate strategy does. It tells you what you are doing, and honestly, just as importantly, what you are not doing.
Moving right along to Section 3, corporate growth and direction.
So once those major boundaries are locked in, how do these top-level executives actually steer this massive corporate ship? Well, they generally rely on 4 grand directions. First is stability, just persisting in existing, well-performing businesses without making any massive, disruptive changes. Sometimes staying the course is just the smartest move. Then there's expansion or growth, aggressively increasing market share or diversifying into totally new lines to capture new revenue. But what happens when things go wrong? That's retrenchment, utilizing a turnaround, divestment, or even total liquidation to stop the bleeding. And finally, combination, seamlessly mixing these approaches across a diverse portfolio. These are the ultimate paths an enterprise takes to generate true synergy, where the whole company becomes way greater than the sum of its parts.
The high-level workflow for these executives is pretty fascinating. First, they evaluate their total portfolio of businesses. Second, they choose a generic direction, like growth or retrenchment, for each specific part of that portfolio. And third, they allocate the resources. In a way, corporate executives are acting almost exactly like internal investors. They distribute capital to their various strategic business units, or SBUs, based strictly on where they see the absolute best opportunity for a return on investment.
Let's move down the ladder a bit to Section 4, business and functional levels.
Check out this direct contrast to really solidify the difference we're talking about here. Corporate strategy asks, should we own a fast food chain? Meanwhile, business strategy asks, how do we beat Burger King? Do you see the difference? Corporate chooses the battlefield. Business strategy figures out how to actually win the battle in that specific market against ruthless direct rivals.
Take Staples, for example. How does a brick-and-mortar office supply chain survive in a world totally dominated by online mega retailers? They used a highly competitive business-level strategy. To stand out, they didn't just aggressively discount their paper and pens. They added high-value services, like UPS shipping stations, and they hired mobile technicians who can physically fix your computer. This is a business strategy focused entirely on product differentiation. They found uniquely valuable ways to stand out in a specific market segment, so customers literally have to choose them over the online alternative.
But hey, business strategy isn't always about fighting your rivals directly. It can actually be incredibly cooperative. Take Intel, the microprocessor manufacturer. They famously formed a cooperative alliance with Microsoft. By linking their hardware and software strategies together, both of these companies gained a massive mutual competitive advantage over Intel's main competitor, AMD. It's a brilliant example of how a strategic partnership at the business level can just completely lock down a market.
Now we're dropping all the way down to the foundational bottom layer, the functional level strategy. This involves the specific actions of your individual departments: marketing, finance, R&D, operations, HR. This is where the day-to-day resource allocation and operational magic actually happens. It's the engine that literally executes the business and corporate strategies. Think of it this way. If corporate is the architect and business is the foreman, functional is the crew actually out there pouring the concrete. To see this functional level in action, just look at the immense pressure Walmart faced at the very start of the 2020 pandemic. Their overall business strategy was obviously to remain a dominant retail leader, but it was their functional level operational pivot that made it a reality. When global supply chains basically started to panic, Walmart laid a massive emphasis on strengthening their own supply chain logistics. They implemented rapid new store protocols to meet terrifying, unprecedented consumer demand, all while keeping their daily operations moving safely.
And the success of that functional execution? Undeniable. Because of their sheer operational readiness, by April 2020, Walmart's grocery app registered a staggering 460% growth in average daily downloads compared to just a few months prior. That single number is the ultimate proof of how a functional strategy, when perfectly executed, can support a massive corporate goal during a time of extreme crisis.
Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Uniting the Hierarchy.
Now, for any of this to actually work, an organization has to perfectly align its internal environment, meaning its culture, its people, its structural setup, with the external environment, like the global economy, shifting tech, and fierce competition. And this complex alignment requires totally seamless communication. The grand vision absolutely has to flow down from the corporate executives, but the functional front lines have to communicate bottom up. I mean, they're the ones actually talking to the customers, right? They ensure the company's internal capabilities are actually matching external market pressures in real time.
When that hierarchy isn't united, you are going to run into some severe implementation pitfalls. Lack of ownership means nobody is stepping up to drive the plan. Poor communication, that means your frontline workers have absolutely no idea what the corporate goal even is. Resource starvation means executives created a beautiful plan on paper, but totally failed to give the functional departments the budget to actually pull it off. And a lack of accountability means no one is even tracking the metrics to see if it's working. At the end of the day, the most brilliant corporate strategy in the world is completely useless if the functional level isn't empowered and funded to execute it. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. Look closely at your favorite brand today. Maybe it's the smartphone in your hand, or the grocery store down the street. Can you spot the difference between their high-level corporate umbrella decisions and their daily functional battlefield tactics? Because I promise you, once you start looking at businesses through this three-tier hierarchy, you will truly never see the commercial world the same way again. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep looking for the deep strategy behind the success.